right. So I am back with Sebastian Nothwell, author of Mr. Warren's Profession, which we just heard, and also co-host and editor of Right Here, Right Queer podcast. And you just read us a delicious sample of this class differences, mill like labor workforce scene. And, like we were saying, I love the microtrope of they've just given each other permission to use their first names. Some of the things that stuck out to me in this scene was the another microtrope that I love in class differences, which is the kind of like the education of the higher class person on how privileged they are and how,
Yep.
like, no, I can't use a calling card box. So, how did you think about that as you were writing this class difference novel?
I think that particular microtrip was inspired by how, when I was writing this at the time, I was working boutique retail on food stamps. So
Wow.
I was like struggling to get gas in my car to get to work. And meanwhile, the people we were selling to were people with vacation homes and yachts. So, like,
Yes.
it was such a vast gulf that about once a week I would encounter a customer who would say something and it would just be so immediately evident that they lived in a completely different world. And every once in a while, I did let the retail mask slip and tell them something they weren't quite ready to hear. Like, oh, there was a moment where one of our furniture dealers asked me for my opinion on like how a particular piece of wicker would work on his vacation home deck. And I was like, I'm not really in the tax bracket to answer that question. I don't really have, I've never really formed that particular opinion.
Right. What was necessary to get to a happily ever after in the historical romance text for these two characters who are from such different backgrounds?
It's a lot of trial and error on their parts trying to bridge that gap, and it helps that the aristocratic character, Lindsay, is a bit more open minded to bucking social norms than most people in his class. He's much more, he's not quite on Edward Carpenter level, if you're familiar with that
I don't
particular.
think so.
Okay, so Edward Carpenter was a late 19th and early 20th century socialist and gay rights advocate.
Okay.
So he was ahead of his time on a lot of levels, and one of the more notable events of his life was looking at his middle class upbringing and going, wait a minute, this is all hollow and pointless pageantry. I'm going to go buy a farm and live on it with my working class boyfriend, and we're going to build a commune.
Okay. Love
Yeah.
it.
So Lindsay's not quite at his level just yet, but he is closer to his level than most.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and clearly there's a lot of research, like just in this scene, all of the conversation about the self-acting mule and also the detail of the calling card case. Can you talk to me about your research process for building this world and writing this novel?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to research just because I find the Victorian era fascinating, just that kind of shift from a pastoral society to an industrial one, which
Hmm.
had begun before the Victorian era happened and continued on after the Victorian era happened. But it's really that 100-year span where everyone goes from 0 to 60.
Yes.
And for the mill part of it, I didn't get the chance to travel to England to research, but I was able to go to Lowell, Massachusetts, where they have the Boot Mills Museum. And
Hmm.
the information they have available there is just like absolutely mind blowing and extraordinarily helpful in building this world.
Yeah, I was just like, "Oh my gosh, you have looked at a mill. I can tell you've been able to like really sit with this and I loved it."
I've been fortunate
Um,
enough to be in a room where they turned on just one of the spinning jennies, and the noise that generated was more than enough. To the point where before they let you go in, they make you put on ear protection.
That's crazy.
It's
And that was
wild.
what children were working in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
19th
yeah, yeah.
century.
Yeah.
Yeah.